let's get started. First off, I just want to say thank you guys all for being here. This is our first ever in-person event for Unicorner, and I also appreciate that you guys took the time to come out to the east side for this event. I know everything's been mostly localized around the west side, but it's honestly awesome to also be able to highlight this area of LA as well as the cool things we're doing here, including the space, which we'll talk about shortly. Today's objective of the panel, we want to talk a little about what it's like building a startup in LA, and we have 7 incredible founders that we brought here today. Covers companies that we detailed in the past to basically share what their learning experience has been and give us some ideas of what it's like to build a company should you choose to build here in LA. To everybody who's online, I hope you're all doing well. Good to see you guys. You'll be able to ask your questions for the panel by clicking on the book Utopia, and thank you very much to Daniel for providing us with the space today. A brief introduction to myself. My name is Adek. I'm one of the co-founders and co-editors of Unicorner. We're a startup newsletter, and we'll talk a little more about that. We're both students at UCLA in our 4th year for undergraduate. We run Unicorner as a part-time project to shine light on really cool companies. I'll let Ethan introduce himself and Unicorner as well.
So, hi everybody, I'm Ethan. A lot of times introducing myself after Adek is a little difficult because I also work with Unicorner. I'm also a student at UCLA. Yada, yada, yada. So everything's the same. So that's me. So a little bit about Unicorner. Hopefully people in the audience, you guys are already a little bit aware of Unicorner, but we are the 2-minute newsletter that will break down early stage companies every Monday morning. So like Adek mentioned, we have 7 amazing panelists here today who are running companies that we've covered in the past, and we're going to get a little bit more into what they're doing a little bit later. So now Adek is going to introduce the space that we're in.
So you guys are probably wondering, where is this place that we have made you drive out to in Glendale? So there is a bit of a story here. It's not just some random space. In fact, it's a place that Ethan and I helped launch about a year ago around the same time. This space is called Hero House. We are a co-working and innovation hub based in Glendale, serving the SoCal population of founders, investors, students, and tech professionals. We are in partnership with the city of Glendale, and we run several accelerator programs through our in-house VC firm, Smart VC. We focus on deep tech investments. This space is also provided to us by Zadi and High Rise Investments, and you guys should definitely talk with him. He's awesome and very, very knowledgeable. And if you are a founder building here in Los Angeles, building here on the east side of LA, we highly recommend come talk with me, come talk with Ethan, and we can tell you a bit more about what the space is and what options you have when it comes to working out of here. And I'll give it to Ethan.
All right, so next up, talk a little bit about Topia. So I'll let Daniel do most of the talking about Topia eventually. Actually, Daniel, if you want, you can introduce now.
Hey everybody. So Topia is what is now known as a metaverse platform. They are big customizable game canvases that you can embed all sorts of media and content inside of. And similar to how we were doing networking before, there might be 100 people in a space and you're connecting over encrypted video chat to anybody that you're in proximity to. And so you can also stream for events like this where people in the digital space are able to see people in the physical space. I'm not sure if we set up a video, but often in hybrid events in the physical space, you can also see the digital people and sort of have bi-directional conversations and interactions in the metaverse and the physical. And that is what we also are doing, metaverse as a service. So we let people and companies create their own metaverse platforms and experiences, and that is what we're doing.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, and we'll have more opportunity to talk a bit more about Topia, but basically we have about the same amount of audience joining us in the metaverse today, and we'll broadcast that page up on that screen over there in a bit so that you guys can see what they're seeing. Now, before I have all the founders kind of introduce themselves, I also want to get a general idea of who's here. So if you're a founder, can you please raise your hand for me? Okay, if you're an investor, can you raise your hand? Okay, a student? All right, and all other tech professionals, so you're an engineer, product. Okay, well, we're glad to have you here today, and we're hoping that you'll enjoy the panel and what we have to say. So let's start off like this. All founders, just briefly intro who you are and what you're building. Let's hear it.
Yeah, pleasure to meet everybody here. Happy LA Tech Week, really excited. My name is Michael Velardo, co-founder and president of Subject. We're the Netflix of education, building premium video-based courses that we sell to high schools and districts throughout the U.S. for credit recovery, course expansion, and hence the name Subject. We're here to help any school provide any subject possible and provide anyone from any zip code the chance to learn whatever subject they may want. We're based in Los Angeles. We've been running for about 2 years now. We turned 2 years old in October. We've raised $35 million across the seed and the Series A. Our seed was led by Kleiner Perkins, and our Series A was led by Owl Ventures. And we're really excited to be here today and excited to be on this panel. And anyone who wants to chat afterwards, I'll be hanging around. So thank you for your time today.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Al Simon. Out of show of hands, who has traveled in the last 12 weeks or 12 months? Okay, good. So I'm in good company. I started Allude. I'm the CEO and co-founder there. Allude, what we do is budget-based travel. So if you have, let's say, $1,000 and next weekend, we showcase everywhere in the world where you could afford to get to. That's flight and hotel. So anytime that you're going on your next trip, give us a look. Again, I'm here looking forward to just chatting and going through some questions.
Hey everyone, my name is Fatima Dico. I'm the CEO of Sugar. It comes from the concept of borrowing a cup of sugar from your neighbor and how we've gotten away from that. We're a resident experience platform where we turn strangers into neighbors and neighbors into friends. We built a really cool platform where people can unlock doors, pay their rent, and earn karma points for being a good neighbor. And we sell the product directly to building owners and managers. We raised a few million last year from folks like Metaprop, Sequoia, Lightspeed, based in LA, moved here. Originally a New Yorker, I was in the Bay for a bit while at Stanford Business School. Didn't like the Bay at all, came to LA, like it a lot more. And just excited to be here and connect with other founders and talk about the real stuff that people want to talk about.
Hey everyone, I'm Audrey Wu. I'm co-founder and CEO of Root Health. I'm a UCLA grad. I was born and raised in LA. And Root Health is a digital clinic for pregnancy. And that means that we give telehealth sessions. In addition, we just launched a product called Ask a Doula, which means you can text a doula for free, 9 to 6, and ask any random question you want. And so that's been a lot of fun for us. We raised a couple million last year. We were part of Y Combinator's summer 21 class. And then we ended up doing United Healthcare Techstars after. So you guys, I'm accelerated. That's me.
Hey, my name is Travis Holloway. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Solo Funds. Solo is a community finance platform where if you need access to capital between $50 and $500, you're able to get that from our mobile marketplace where you actually set your own terms as a borrower. If you have discretionary capital, you're able to deploy that capital to people who need it, and you can earn industry-leading returns, which right now are averaging right around 28%. So bull and bear market, we're one of the best. We are now based in Los Angeles. We moved here in 2019. I'm incredibly excited to be here. We raised roughly $30 million, and excited to get to know you all.
So I already kind of told you what Topia does, but I'm Daniel Liebeskin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Topia, and we raised last year. Our lead investor is 776, led by Alex Ohanian, founder of Reddit, and then Bonfire Ventures, which is an LA B2B based VC that's amazing. And we have two different business lines. One is more consumer. We co-hosted Virtual Burning Man the last 2 years with over 25,000 people coming for each of those. We've had weddings and graduation parties and all sorts of consumer use cases. We also have a more enterprise and B2B use case, which is mostly around product demonstrations, content marketing, embedding all sorts of experiences inside of worlds, and then having serendipity, having people be able to interact with the creators of a product, for example. And happy to talk more about that.
Hi everyone, I'm Luca Pembello, CEO and founder of Journey. Journey is a hospitality tech platform. We help automate Airbnbs hotels and guest experiences. We are LA based, raised about $13.5 million so far. Two of our LA based VCs, actually they led both of our rounds. One is Okapi and the other one is Macher.
You guys can just keep the microphone passed around as you guys like. So this next question is going to be for everybody. And so I noticed, Audrey, you mentioned you're born and raised in LA. Travis, you mentioned that you moved to LA. So this question is really for everybody, but so what is your and your company's relationship with LA? And what does LA mean to you?
Well, I'm originally from Italy. I moved to US directly to LA 13 years ago, and by kind of like random chances, I stumbled into a business, which is the short-term rental business. Very early on, where Airbnb, VRBO were not yet a big thing, and somebody just asked me to rent. They were looking for a mansion to throw a party, and I couldn't find anything online. I just went home, built a landing page, realized that there was a market opportunity, and that landing page did $1.2 million in revenue, like just from Google Ads, just being an assistant. So I realized it was a pretty good market opportunity, and I'm gonna move here. I didn't realize I was gonna stay here, but eventually moved the company to a WeWork. Learn a lot because I met a lot of other tech startups there, and realized that if you really want to grow a company in the US, you can raise venture money. And so LA has been very helpful for me, and it's thanks to LA that I met a lot of interesting people and was able to find two great investors.
So I've lived in New York, San Francisco, and LA, and I've kind of like gone around and around between those three throughout my life. And I think LA years ago was less of a startup hub than it is now. Originally, it was kind of like if you were doing entertainment or media, then LA was a great place. But if you're doing deep technology or developer tools, then San Francisco's a place. New York is the number one for fintech. I think LA, though, over the last 4 or 5 years, really has grown up as a startup hub. Maybe because the weather's amazing, maybe because during the pandemic, this was just the place to go if you were a New Yorker. And great exodus out of San Francisco. Whatever the reason, I think LA now is really just a hub of all sorts of amazing stuff that's going on. If you're in media or entertainment, which Topia, Metaverse has a lot of entertainment properties, it's still by far the number one place to be, but it's quickly growing as a hub for other specializations as well.
I think LA for me is, I saw a couple of trends years ago, so I also used to live in New York. I mean, we could also probably play the game of like raise your hand if you ever lived in New York. Actually, let's play that game. Who here has ever lived in New York City? Actually less than I would have thought, but in 2018, I heard that like 10,000 New Yorkers per month were moving to LA. And it's pretty hard to throw a rock and not hit someone who's now living here, who's formerly living in New York City. And I saw this mass exodus, and I realized that there was a ton of talent here. And as we talk about the three cities, San Francisco, New York, and LA is actually the cheapest, right? Like you get more for your money here. And that was attractive to me. But also I saw significant talent opportunities here. So that's the reason why we came. I would tell you that when I first got here in 2018, that to your point, I think it was very much still entertainment focused for the most part. And I'm seeing the evolution of both VCs now being here. If they're not based here, they're spending more time here. Many are relocating to LA. And I think that opens up opportunities for the people that are in this room. I also think that we're continuing to see people from New York and from San Francisco move here in droves, which just gives us even more talent to pull from. So, for me, I think it was exactly what I would have hoped it would have been. I will tell you that the one drawback that I personally have experienced is that I felt like it was harder to raise money in New York. And I have significantly more New York investors on my cap table than I do LA. So I haven't necessarily had a bunch of LA capital deployed into my company, but that's my experience. But on the flip side, I'm optimistic because I'm just seeing more opportunities start to become available.
So, I was born and raised here, but I did go to New York for a short stint to do investment banking, because why do anything easy ever? I love LA for technology because it's super diverse. You really genuinely do, it's not like San Francisco, which is super homogenous. I have a group of female founders that we brunch every now and then, and I would say we're 80% diverse, and together we probably raised about 50 million total, so it's really exciting to see that. There's a great community. I've always been more on the east side, and so since like 2015, I worked in downtown LA at a conversational AI startup, and then I started my own conversational AI SaaS platform, which is based in LA, and it was called Converge, and it was very beneficial because we did a lot of projects with media entertainment companies, such as the Grammys. We did something with Orion Pictures. So it was just really geographically a good place for us. We exited that company in 2019, and during the pandemic is when we built Root Health. So we went through a pre-accelerator, so yeah, I guess, Jesus, 3. Grid 110, which is an amazing, amazing organization, and I highly recommend you all look into it. That actually was where we pivoted our idea into Root Health. We were actually something completely different. We were a medical device. And it was through that program with that community of entrepreneurs within the LA area that we came out with actually a very strong idea, and one that got us into a couple of other accelerators. So I think just the diverse faces I see just makes my heart sing, and you just don't really see that anywhere else.
To kind of echo what a lot of folks on the panel already said, after having been, in the Bay for a couple years, one thing I noticed as soon as I got there is that there wasn't anything special about the air there. Other smart people were moving there because they thought other smart people were there. While I did meet a lot of incredible people, there was this homogenous way of thinking that I think in many ways almost stifled creativity, at least at the early stage where you're in the phase of just talking to people about your idea and ideating. And one thing that stuck with me that one of my mentors mentioned early on is that great ideas often happen when two old ideas meet for the first time, which I think is very simple but profound in that the more different sectors can come together, whether that's media, entertainment, and tech, or two seemingly different spaces and areas, and there's ideation amongst the two, then there's some really powerful things that can happen. And so coming to LA for me was, one, wanting to be in an environment like that, but also it was very psychological. As many of you know, being an entrepreneur, one of the hardest things is managing your own psychology, right? And I think more people are talking about mental health and starting a company. And so I think that now more than ever, being in an environment that actually inspires and uplifts you, whether that's like if you need to go on hikes, if you need to be at the beach, if you need to work out of a cafe, around a certain type of energy. I'm very big on the environment and the energy of the space that you're in. And so coming to a place where I felt that was important for me. And COVID changed everything that I believed about starting a company. Our first $2.5 million seed round was done completely on Zoom, right? I hadn't met any of the investors in person. And at first I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask people for these like 6-figure checks, and I've never met them in person, right? And we're now in this space where that's possible, right? Like we are now desensitized to a lot of this investment activity and hiring happening over Zoom. And so I think that really widens, our aperture into what's possible remotely, right? And so that's been really great. And then lastly, what I'll say just about LA is it's been awesome to build culture for our team. We've done everything from going on a boat in Marina Del Rey or going on a group hike. And if you're gonna do the remote thing, I think quarterly, even coming together and just doing something that builds community amongst the team, it's invaluable. Like those are the moments where productivity and energy and everything just spikes up. And it could be as simple as just, people coming together and doing an escape room. And to me, LA offers so much of that. that you would be remiss not to take advantage of it to build teams and culture and yeah.
First off, let me just say, LA is fucking awesome. I feel like everybody here probably feels the same way. This is why we're out here for LA Tech Week. My background was over in investment banking before starting Elude, so I feel your pain over there. But yeah, I was over at Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank, and to be quite blunt to what everybody's basically saying, it's pretty difficult to raise for just like based off of an idea out there. If you don't have hundreds of thousands of downloads, or in maybe fintech or fragrance, those are kind of like the only two that I say are probably top for New York. You're probably looking elsewhere to go out and raise money, and for us specifically, when we came out to LA, we were welcomed by other founders, by other members, by other VCs. Our first VC was Munger Capital, which is based here in LA, and we've since kind of scaled to other VCs and such. But for us, it was always about community and always about culture. And I think specifically when it comes to travelers, New York, LA, San Francisco, again, these are like transplant locations, right? We're talking about people who are coming and going fairly frequently. So it wasn't just for us in terms of building our network and building our community, but it was really great to just get in front of users and say, hey, okay, you just came out of a flight from Dallas, let's talk. You're going to Puerto Rico next weekend, what are you doing, right? And so I think like for us, LA has always been about culture and about just like being able to be ourselves out here and network amongst other founders. And again, this is a prime example of how great LA is.
Yeah, well said by everyone here. It's really exciting because LA is the dreamer's capital of the world. I think Hollywood has a great influence on the city, with everyone moving here to try to become an actor or actress, and some of this creative energy, it really bleeds through all these other industries. And while tech entrepreneurship is largely thought of as the Bay Area, LA is the #1 small business city in the entire country. There's so many restaurants and barbershops and so much you can learn from all these other industries that makes it really exciting to build here in LA. And our company is actually somewhat contrarian, where we're in person in Los Angeles, so we have a headquarters in Beverly Hills, and we have over 30 employees that we work together every day, and it's really special to be able to attract talent from the east side over here all the way to the west side. We have some people who drive from Orange County and Santa Clarita, and that's really special about Los Angeles, is there's so much diversity, not only cultural diversity, but professional diversity, which makes it really special. I came out here from Chicago to go to UCLA, and it's another city that in terms of top university talent, there's 5 top 40 universities within an hour drive, which makes it really special and a way to be able to attract a lot of young talent, and especially young technical talent, which is ever so rare and precious in building up these technology companies. And you can't go enough without saying, San Francisco, obviously where a lot of tech has been birthed. LA is only an hour flight from there. I was actually just there yesterday, woke up, went to the Burbank airport, a great flight, Burbank up to San Jose, and back within one day. That proximity to San Francisco allows you to leverage those incredible resources that still remain, while I think everyone here agrees, having a much better lifestyle and holistic approach to life by living in Los Angeles.
Awesome, thanks guys. I know we briefly touched on this, but I wanted to hear some more of your thoughts from whoever has anything to add. Everybody here represents a very diverse set of industries across companies. We have with Ruth Health, we have maternity care, we have ed tech, travel. Now, again, and I know we briefly talked about how LA has may have predominantly had a focus on media and entertainment, but when it comes to your specific industry, if you feel it's at all relevant, how has LA positively or negatively impacted your growth and sort of ability to work within that space?
Yeah, for us, LA has been everything. One of the panelists touched on it earlier. This is the capital of media and production in the entire world. And for what we do, we really try to bring premium videography, hence the Netflix added, to education with rigorous academic qualities, but it looks like your favorite Netflix documentary or docuseries. That couldn't be done anywhere else in the entire world except Los Angeles. So we're really grateful for this home here. We started off filming with a marketing intern in our startup on the UCLA campus. Then we graduated to using a production company in the Hills, renting out Airbnbs. Now we have our own production studio in Beverly Hills at, adjacent to the Live Nation office, and you're working with all these incredible studio talent that can only happen in Los Angeles. And as you noted, we're an ed tech company, but a lot of these companies, all of us up here, are either adjacent to media entertainment, maybe it's branding. Everyone at the end of the day, whether you're a founder or a company, personal brand and company brand is so important. And LA really knows how to sell itself. And it's really exciting to be able to learn from these incredible industries that are best in the entire world.
Yeah, and I'd say for us, I know for talent in general, I think for talent in general, it's a great place to be. For us, we hire both locally as well as remote, being a travel brand. But I will say this, like when you look at just people in general in LA, what you find is most people spend their money either on food or travel, right? And so for us in particular, it really is a great aspect for, as a positive note, just being able to actually have and get in front of people.
So our company operates within the prop tech sector, formerly known real estate technology. And it's been really cool. Our origin stories when I first moved to Koreatown here in LA, I lived in an apartment building with hundreds of people and realized I didn't know a single person at the property. And so we put a QR code in the elevator, and within a couple of days, we had over half of the building using the platform. And so that was kind of the beginning of Sugar. And then we started going around selling the app on foot, just going door to door to different apartment buildings in LA, bringing snacks and DoorDash gift cards to people, and really started to make, gain some traction. And it's a great place for real estate as well. Obviously, real estate is the largest global asset class with only a 1% technology utilization rate. So the opportunity is just endless. And I think, it's been a great place for us from a real estate perspective.
I would just point, healthcare is actually gaining a huge presence here in LA, and it's super, super exciting. And, prior to starting Ruth Health, I had mentioned we had a medical device, and we actually got into CTIP, which is in partnership with Children's Hospital of LA and the UCLA, USC medical centers and schools. So that was super cool to get 2 grants from the FDA to continue to build our product. Now, that was available to us because, we learned about it through connections in LA. And is based in LA. So it was just really, really magical to have that kind of network. Now, we're a remote company, so right now, that was just kind of how it played out during COVID. You really weren't seeing anybody, but, we do have some great investors here in Los Angeles, including Cleo Capital and Emily Ventures, 2 female-founded VC firms. And so you're seeing a lot of diverse investors as well. I would say our cap table is probably 60% diverse. And that was very, very, very intentional.
I also think, and I don't think anyone said it here yet, but LA from an angel investor perspective is actually like a really fertile ground, right? You have all of these entertainers, you have athletes, you have people across a number of industries who have significant net worth and are capable or able to actually invest in your business. So I think that is not the story for many other places throughout the country. And that's something that we have definitely benefited from. With that said, I think that a lot of the fintechs that find themselves in LA tend to be what I would call, or what I believe to be a bit more innovative and kind of like anti-traditional finance. So when I look to my left and to my right, I see like some really great companies that are growing incredibly fast, but most importantly, great companies to poach talent from. So for me, I think it's, I think that's been one of the biggest benefits of being here.
So I think that you draw a lot of inspiration from the people that you intersect yourself with. I actually was an investment banker in New York as well, a long time ago, Lehman Brothers, to date myself. And a lot of my network in New York are bankers and are in the financial world. And so the inspiration, if I was there, would be around fintech, right, and around financial innovation. In San Francisco, I was a VC, and I intersected with a lot of tech people and entrepreneurs, which was amazing. But it was a very homogeneously tech culture. In LA, I'm inspired by artists and experienced designers, and so it's not really a coincidence that I started a platform for experienced designers and artists, right? And so I think there's a saying that you're an amalgamation or something of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so I think that's true of your community, it's true of your setting. And in LA, you get to intersect with really diverse perspectives, backgrounds, art, creation. And so that's been really fundamental to my journey, and I think a lot of the people around me that are in LA.
Yeah, it's very interesting because for us, LA was very helpful in the very beginning, especially like being in trouble. I don't think I would have been able to do what I'm doing right now if it wasn't for LA, especially networking, finding, creating a network of investors and meeting a lot of other founders. That was like super helpful. I think post-pandemic, because you asked the question both ways, right? Post-pandemic, I think it really has changed for us. Like, we realized that hiring, like anywhere, and when I mean anywhere, even outside of the US, is actually something that's been very helpful for us. We were able to have a super lean burn, I guess, because of the fact that we were able to hire top talent all over the world and not just focus on just US specifically. And when we were just mainly based in LA with all our employees and have a large office and everything, was very expensive for us. So I think, to look at both sides, for us, especially in the very beginning, I would not be able to do what I did if I was not in LA. So 100% in the networking factor, I think is very important. But I think as you grow, those things may change.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear your perspectives. It's also great that most of what you guys have mentioned are benefits, investment, talent. I think I'm learning that in order to be a successful founder in LA, I need to be an investment banker first. But on that note, what advice would you guys give to people who are looking to either start a company in LA or maybe move to LA?
Yeah, I mean, I think the networking factor is very important, especially now that it's hopefully it looks like the pandemic is not an issue anymore. But one of the things that we did specifically was to go into like speed dating events, like there was this group still around called Expert Dojo. That's literally how we met our first lead investor. So that for us was super helpful, and I think the fact that you can actually get to meet a lot of founders in person and really asking them how did they do what they did. This is something that I personally did because I moved here, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know anything about the venture world, and I just learned it by asking people. So I think that's something that LA really has to offer.
So I'd say one of the things about LA is that similar sentiment, you really can get access to people here. In San Francisco, it's a very almost hierarchical system, right? Where do you work? Who have you worked with? What's your role? Are you an engineer? Are you not an engineer? And in LA, it seems like a lot of those barriers are not there. And so I would encourage people to build in public is sort of my second piece of advice. Topia, we launched 3.5 weeks after the first line of code. Now, I've been building platforms like this for a long time, so it's not exactly how much energy went into it. But still, we launched way before it was ready. And the great thing about LA is if you do something like that, there's a lot of people that will rally that you can get access to, that you can ask about your platform. And if you have fear of talking to people about your idea or about your product because you're afraid they're going to steal it, first of all, that's unlikely to happen in LA, just the reality. And second, if you're not the right team or you're not the right person to build your thing and somebody can just steal it, the reality is if you build something that is useful enough that you get a lot of customers, you're going to have competition. And if you're not the right people to build it, you're going to find out then. You may as well find out right off the bat.
Yeah, I actually say that all the time. People tend to think that someone cares about your idea so much that they're going to stop everything that they're doing. They're going to leave their job. They're going to start like couch surfing as a founder or living paycheck to paycheck just to work on some idea that you had. The odds of that are just incredibly low. It took me 2 years to muster up the strength to leave my last job to do this full time. So with that said, I think if you're thinking about building a company, I think LA is a great place to do it. Don't move to Nashville, or Austin, or any of these other places, because I think at some point, most people who you're gonna want to come in contact with are going to find themselves in LA, right? People visit here, they vacation here, they're here for work, and I think this is just a great place to build a community. And I think that again, the proximity to the Bay as well, where obviously there's a lot of capital from a venture standpoint, is literally a day trip. I specifically also moved here because it was a 40-minute flight to San Francisco. I will not spend the night in San Francisco if I don't absolutely have to. So I would wake up in the morning early, I would go there, and I'm home for dinner. This is where I'm gonna be.
So my advice in terms of starting a company in LA is, you just gotta try, right? It's like that stupid Yoda quote, right? Like, you just have to try. If you don't try, you're never gonna know. And it took me some time too to really make that leap. I knew I wanted to work at a startup, in a small one, and I sort of made that leap in 2015, and it was really scary, but I was getting a paycheck. But then I got to a point where I had met my co-founder on a panel, and we were both kind of at the same place in our lives. We're like, we want to do something on our own, and it was just a really good place for us to do it. We got a lot of mentors, a lot of female mentors, and it's also really exciting because, as I mentioned, I have a cohort of friends where we kind of all started, building our things around the same time, and we've all nobody has a traditional background. It's not like I came from Stanford computer science, right? Like, it's very different, especially amongst female founders. We're all very, very diverse. So I think it's just been really, really good for us to have that sort of diversity, to have that kind of mentorship. There's just a lot of also very powerful female founder networks here that are amazing for new entrepreneurs. And I meet also with a lot of female entrepreneurs that just moved here, who were just like asking, and I want to build that community for them and make all the intros that I can.
Advice for founders. I would say, well, first and foremost, don't just start a company because you're bored in LA, you're looking for the next chapter. It's super basic, but you should almost envision the next 5 to 7 years of your life working on this idea. And with your co-founders, it's almost like a marriage. Like, you're going to be spending so much time with them, and so I would be remiss if I didn't mention, make sure this is the idea and the thing that you want to work on. Because the opportunity cost is everything else you can be doing, which today, the possibilities are endless. I would say, the infamous Paul Graham saying from Y Combinator, it's better to have 100 people love what you're building than 1 million people know about it. And so really leverage this, ability for LA to be very communal, to first and foremost try to build a community around whatever it is that you're trying to build. And then just leverage and utilize your proximity to the Bay as much as possible. There was a phase where I was going back and forth. I was on this thing called Cabin. There were beds on a bus. It goes back and forth between LA and the Bay. You could sleep and then arrive in the Bay. So yeah, sleeping on a bus better than sleeping in San Francisco. But yeah, when it comes to fundraising, I took a very methodical approach where, I said, okay, if I need 10 investors and, 1 in 20 will say yes, and I need 200 pitches, and then, when I go to the Bay for, X many days, I'll line up this many meetings, and then I'll go to New York, line up this many meetings, like just taking that kind of approach. And so, you don't have to be in the Bay, but you could leverage your proximity to it as much as possible.
I love that we're all shitting on San Francisco. It's definitely great. So I will say this, and something that we not have mentioned yet. When it comes to New York mentality, this is the one thing that I will say coming out to LA has been the best thing. There's a lot of lazy people in LA. I hate to call attention to it, but if you have the work ethic and you have the drive and you have the passion, you have the idea, and you have the team, you're going to be able to make it here. It's one of those things where you just need to kind of put those first few feet down and really get at it. But there's a lot of people who just go out for surfing for the weekend or the week, and then it turns into the long weekend. And so that's definitely something that I've seen as far as kind of being a founder here in LA is once you have that mentality, it's very easy to continue kind of lapping other people in some cases, not to, again, diminish anybody in LA. The second thing, and this is like the biggest, I guess, piece of advice that I give most founders who are starting out is so growing up, you're told that it's all who you know, and that's completely a lie. It's all who knows you, and that's the kind of complex that I think a lot of people don't necessarily get right off the bat. You may know 100 people, but if they're not going to actually answer your email or introduce you to the right network or connect you, it's kind of like a dead end in that case. And so just try flipping the script and maybe introducing yourself and giving some type of value to individuals, and then hopefully that reciprocates.
Yeah, all outstanding advice around the panel. It's been a lot of fun learning from everybody here. The biggest thing I always advise founders is get really comfortable with a lot of rejection. You got to get excited about sending hundreds of LinkedIn and Twitter DMs every single weekend for fundraising and then recruiting and then selling your product. And so getting comfortable with rejection is something that's really important that I always emphasize and can't emphasize it enough. But in terms of the starting a business, I truly believe, and we touched on it earlier here, finding the right co-founder is everything. You have to have an incredible relationship with your co-founder. You're spending so much time with that person, and that's why I would advise if you want to start a business in LA, either come here and potentially work for a tech startup here, or go to UCLA, USC, and build a lot of relationships and networks through there. And maybe you don't meet your co-founder at that company. There's a lot of great companies here now, Snap, Service Titan, some incredible technology startups. Or you do your undergrad or MBA or JD at one of these great schools in LA. But through that networking, you start to compound those network effects. You can meet someone you feel really passionate about, because just going through some of these shotgun wedding, shotgun founder stories I've heard, it doesn't really set you up for success to be able to manage conflict effectively. And startups, there's a lot of highs, there's also a lot of lows. So in order to get through those lows, you have to have someone you really trust and can empower you to be the best version of yourself, and someone that can be really strong at being able to confront you when you're doing something that's not best for the business. Because as a leader, you have a fiduciary duty to do what's best for the business. And so I can't trust enough finding the right co-founders. And LA is a great place to do that because of the diversity I talked about earlier, from a professional and cultural aspect, to build a very strong company here in Los Angeles.
Awesome, thanks guys so much. I want to quickly turn to some of the questions that people have been asking online, and then we'll also, a few questions will also open up to people here. For everybody online on Topia, in case you have not noticed, there is a book that you can click on to ask your questions, and I will be reading them here. I can't promise that every question will be answered, but we will try to get through as many as we can in the time that we have. One that I thought was really interesting that we were actually kind of going to cover, that's a little not so specific to LA, but of course, if you can think of LA resources and ways that LA has impacted you in this sense, it would be great. What is the strategy for getting co-founders, managers, staff members, and what traits do you personally look for in that process? Because it's obviously not just LA specific, but it would be great to hear those calls.
Yeah. So I was going to UCLA Anderson at the time that I met my co-founder, and he actually, I think, has the best answer to this type of story. He wasn't going to UCLA, but he joined a networking program through the school where we were able to pair up and get to know each other, and we just became friends quickly from that attitude. But the biggest thing that I was looking for, and I felt like he was as well, is looking for someone that you knew without a doubt, no matter what, would work as hard as you were going to work on this business. And you actually talked about it a lot, which I really appreciate, just like being able to outwork people and accomplish what someone may take a year to get done in 3 to 6 months. That puts you far ahead of the curve. And so in order to find someone that you will never get frustrated with or disappointed with, really testing for that relentless work ethic, and especially, as founders go, I would say the biggest thing is the ability to work tirelessly over the weekend, which is definitely going to be something that takes place when you're a founder. And so you can kind of start to test that with a friendship or whatnot, how quickly, and then sounds really minute and nitpicky, like how quickly do they text you back? How quickly do they make plans? Do they flake on the plans? These type of things, I have, saying always be early and never flake. These are the type of things I was really looking for in a co-founder. I was really lucky to find that person, and we've had a great relationship ever since.
So the way that I found my co-founder was I married his sister, and and that's a true story. But no, I think when looking at your co-founder, again, this is somebody that you're going to be working day in and day out with. Specifically for us, you need to go through the most difficult time, I think, together as you start to build a business. I mean, there were moments where we literally had $300 in the bank and we couldn't get back to the U.S. Just because we couldn't afford to fly back. And like those type of moments make or break people, right? You either have people flying back and going on 100 job interviews because they can't make rent, or you have people that say, well, okay, let's give it another shot, and don't you know somebody over here, and can we go and raise X amount of money? Like, you need to have those type of individuals that are going to push the boundaries when things get tough. I think in this particular case, all of us being venture back, yeah, it's a great thing. Great, raise a few $1 million, go out and build a team. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a core, founding team, that will make or break being able to raise a Series A, B, C, and actually building a business.
To echo what's been said earlier, one thing in Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, that I thought was really great was his advice on what to look for when you're bringing people onto your team. He says to look for 3 things. The first is passion for what you're building, work ethic, and coachability, because everything can be taught or trained except for those first 2 things, right? The work ethic piece is critical. In startup life, you have to survive long enough to get lucky, and that often means just out hustling your competitors during the early days. And so you need someone who's going to be just as passionate about your idea, work through the lows. Like, we had moments where we were literally charging credit cards. We were charging scooters in LA to make, when I tell you the lows get super low, they definitely get low. And so having somebody who's going to be so excited about the end vision and who has a similar worldview of what you believe, in terms of year 1, how are we going to compete? Year 3, what do we displace? And year 5, how are we going to transform the industry? If you guys aren't aligned on that end goal of what is it that is going to take place, how is society going to change, what is different about our culture today that makes it the right time for this to exist, these are things that are going to be very hard to get aligned on. And so it's also important to talk about values early on. If you value working on the weekends and you value, to the earlier point, quick responses and a sense of urgency, and this other person maybe values the creative process and procrastination, or maybe they work differently, you want to kind of get a little bit more grounded on what those things are and make sure you're filtering that out.
So I've actually met both of my co-founders on panels. So it's kind of a good place to meet like-minded people. My current co-founder, her name's Allison, and we met speaking on a panel about conversational AI, decided, we were sick of making chatbots. And, she came from the creative end, right? She was doing the front-end conversation design. I was coming from the technology end where, we had the SaaS platform that was powering these conversations. So we really already had very different strengths and weaknesses. And that's kind of what you want to look for in a founder, right? Is someone that can complement you. And founder conflict is real. I will not lie. We went through YC and that was 3 months of panic. And we came out of that not okay. And we had to we used a couple of different executive coaches until we found one that could just really get our heads on straight. And the biggest part of that was realizing that it wasn't about us. It was about Ruth, who was actually named after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in case you're wondering. So everything was about Ruth. And when that shifted and that mind shift went through, we both have crazy strong work ethics, but we had to put boundaries up. Our rule was do not work on Saturdays, period, and stop. Don't look at your emails, don't do anything. We do that as company-wide. And really just kind of creating those healthy boundaries where we're not working until midnight. And I mean, granted, I have a team of 12 now, so I don't have to do everything. But as a founder, you're constantly thinking, and you need somebody that shares that kind of passion and intensity. And we're both very outgoing, spoken people, so it can be a little much for some people. We know we're not for everybody, but it works really well because when we present to investors or whatnot, they just love the sort of bouncing off we have with each other. And while we're really different, we've gotten to a place where we have this sort of one brain mentality because it's all about the company. So These days, you know, yes, we still disagree, but we spend time talking through it, and we do it with curiosity and compassion, because being put through pressure cookers like that, and this is not the first time it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. You know, sometimes it's challenging, and especially if you're friends with somebody first, and then you have to transition into co-founder, that's a tough one, because the boundaries then are different. And it's not just, you know, you hang out with your friend, it's now your co-founder or your work wife or your work husband, and this is the person that you probably talk to the most, other than the partner in your life. So I would say take some time, don't jump into it too quickly, do a little dating at first, you know, like Allison and I were fortunate enough to come up with a wackadoodle medical device idea, so we already knew that we could work together. And that was our first idea. And granted, as I said, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all, and we've actually used the same coach for our entire team to build culture. And that is something that we learned after using the coach, and like, oh, okay, you know, the people we hire are the ones that are gonna dictate the culture. So that being said, come to these events, meet people who are like-minded, do a little founder dating, you know, maybe work on a small project together, see how your work styles are, because everybody's really, really different. Some people are more powerful in the evening, some people are morning people. And you kind of have to give and take there. You can't force anybody to be something they're not.
I got lucky. My co-founder and I have been best friends for like 14 years. He built a career before this. I built a separate one before this, and we had a shared pain point, which was as we started to excel in our professional careers, our friends and family would just ask us for money all the time. So they needed loans for literally everything. No, true story. So because of that, you know, we started looking for solutions. Really, the first solution was just like, where else could we send these people to get the money that they're asking for? And unfortunately, we just couldn't find it. Then we decided that it was worth building. But with that said, I think why we work is because we're not polar opposites. No, we're polar opposites. We're very, very, very different. But if you were to hear us speak about what we're working on and what we're building, it sounds exactly the same. Now, the path that we would take to get there would be different without each other. His risk tolerance is like through the roof, and you know, mine has somewhat of a ceiling. But where we meet in the middle, I think, is it fosters innovation. It fosters, you know, us doing something for the first time that's scary, and it actually allows us to go through the hard times, right? So like we talked about, like the lows are at least mentioned here. You know, our lows have been really, really low, right? Like to the point where payroll's Friday, and it's, you know, you have to submit it a couple of days before, and I'm just like, all right, well, how much money do you have, right? And he's like, well, how much money do I have? And then like we're literally funding payroll in early days, and payroll is significantly different these days. I don't know if we can still do that, but I mean, we were like 15, 20 people, and we were literally funding payroll out of our savings. So we were aligned completely on, we're going for broke with this because we care that much, and we believe that it's going to work. And having someone to look to your left and to your right when the times are hard is like incredibly invaluable. So again, so maybe to recap, everybody's not going to be so lucky to like literally found a company with your best friend, but look for someone who's going to push you and exhibits attributes that you don't have. He's significantly way more creative and innovative than I am, but at the same time, innovation has its limits and practicality has to come in, right? We have to be responsible. So, you know, for us, that was particularly in fintech. So for us, that was the medium game.
So for me, I've had a lot of different people that I've built apps with over the years, and one of the things that I've found is that you don't really know how somebody's going to show up until you've been in the trenches with them, until you've had challenging experiences as well, or arguments, or whatnot. You don't know how that's going to shake out. And so for me, I once had a partner that I didn't really know, met through founder dating, kind of networking event. But with Topia and with other startups, it's really been just my network, and you know, friends of friends. As a co-founder, my leadership team at Topia actually are all basically my best friends. And there's 18 of us now, so we've hired quite a few other people as well. But you know what your friends are like. You've probably had challenging moments with them and you know how they respond. You also know what your friends' superpowers are. And one of the things, Fatima actually brought up Ben Horowitz's book, Hard Thing About Hard Things. Another thing that he talks about is hiring people for their superpowers, not for their lack of weaknesses. And with your friends, often you know what their weaknesses are. And you also know what their superpowers are. And we all have flaws, and we all have superpowers. And when you're constructing your team, it's really important to bring on people that have superpowers that are important to your success, more important than avoiding people's weaknesses. And with your friends, you just kind of know both sides of that coin already, and so it helps you to actually be able to construct a team that is full of really important superpowers, and together, you're like Captain Planet, and you can take on anything.
I think it's all great advice. I founded 3 different companies, so I had co-founders in 3 different settings. So for me, it's a very interesting topic, especially 50-50 partnerships. I think co-founders are a double-edged sword. It can very much help you, but at the same time, it can hurt you if you're not careful on how you do it and how you structure partnerships. I believe that if you choose to have a co-founder, you need to have a complementary skill sets, so very different skill sets. You cannot be working on the same things or be too similar, because otherwise it's going to be complicated. And another thing that I want to say is, like, really think about, do you really need a co-founder? Because in our company, we were able to hire people that care just as much as a co-founder very, very early on, and people that bought into the business. And actually, in my case, I had employees that care more than my co-founder at the time. So my partnership didn't work out too well. Unfortunately, the needs of the business changed, and my co-founder is currently not working in our company anymore. But we had employees that really care, even more than, sometimes I want to say not more than I do, but like as much as I do, which is something that is very important. And sometimes you're the one who comes up with the idea, and you just need someone who just kind of like is the first person. Sometimes your co-founder is your first buyer. He's the first person that believes in your idea, so that's what you're looking for. So I say it is something that is probably necessary for many people, but for some it's not necessary. And you really need to look inside of yourself and say, do I need this person? And then if you find a co-founder, maybe it's later on, and maybe things are not 50-50, because maybe you are the founder of the idea, and sometimes you just want to take ownership of that. And I think sometimes at the beginning it's hard to say that, because you're kind of scared of maybe what other people think, or if this is going to work or not. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think I have my experience brought me to have a little bit different view than I had in the very beginning.
Yeah, great, thanks guys. And thank you for the question. I will say, if you guys are asking questions online, throw your name in there too, so we could say who it was that was asking. But I think at this point, we're going to open up the questions to people in the audience here as well. So if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand. Also, introduce yourselves as well. So we have a question here.
Yeah, my name is Mongo. I'm an incoming freshman at UCLA. My question is for Travis. Obviously, you built a great product, people in need. But my question to you is, how do you think Apple's new product, Pay Later, will affect your business model, or are those two products targeting different niches? So yeah, I just wanted you to talk about what you think about that.
So I'll repeat the question, I guess. Unless you want to.
No, okay.
So the question was basically for Travis, and it is Apple's new product, Pay Later, going to affect you guys, or are they two separate things?
Yeah, so, Pay Later is basically an evolution of Apple entering the buy now, pay later, call it rough industry, if you will. So there's a slew of those companies today. I think Visa actually just did a buy now, pay later debit card, or some card. In short, the answer is like largely no. And actually more definitively, it's just no. It's not necessarily going to affect us. Primarily because when you think about what people use Solo for, it's because they essentially, they had their pet got sick, right? And the vet bill is something that was unexpected, right? They need money for an emergency expense. Now, that emergency expense could be something like your pet getting sick, but it could also be that, you really need gas for your car, or you have a utility bill that's past due, etc. These individuals really need access to emergency capital that fits beyond what they've already earned. And that product is not necessarily going to solve some of the needs that the average everyday American has, right? 80% of our country lives paycheck to paycheck, right? A third of the people who make $250,000, I don't know what they're spending their money on, but they still live paycheck to paycheck as well, right? So when people need access to this emergency capital, they're going to need it from alternative sources. I think buy now, pay later is great. I think Affirm is great. Max Levchin is someone who has kind of been a mentor to me at different times, who was also one of the founders of PayPal. But he looked at us and we looked at him as like, hey, this is like a Swiss Army knife of solutions that need to be at the average individual's disposal when they need access to capital, they need to pay for something. But buy now, pay later is not a one size fits all. Wage advance companies are not a one size fits all, and Solo as a lender is not a one size fits all. So there's a ton of room for all of these companies to exist.
Thanks. Let me see. Yes.
Yeah, my name's Navjo. I'm a software product manager at Teladoc Health. I recently moved to Los Angeles, and I know some of you mentioned that there were some communities, with COVID, subsiding. I haven't seen as many local meetups recently, and I'm just curious if there's specific communities or meetups that you can recommend.
So just to repeat the question from online, are there any communities here in LA that you would be highly recommended to join as a founder of somebody who is looking to learn more about the space?
Well, you're in the right place, right? It's LA Tech Week. So go to as many events as you can. Find your tribe. Depending on maybe it's like regional or, you guys go to the same schools, but you never know. And this has been such a beautiful thing because I've been in LA for a long time and we've been trying to do this for years. And I guess all it took was Andreessen to kind of pump it and everybody came running. So take advantage of this. Everyone's ready to get out because everyone's sick of a Zoom panel. Nobody wants to do that anymore. So take this week. I mean, there's like a bazillion events.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a shout out for someone. So you should get in contact with a guy named Danny Jang. I don't know if anybody has been to a Founders Meets Funder event, but that was one of our first introductions to LA when we came out here. That was where we secured our first $350,000 and met a lot of great angels. And again, Danny Jang is a really great network guy and kind of guru in the area.
Okay, so our next question comes from online. It says, "Hi Daniel, going back to your points about platforms, I'd love to hear your advice on building them. What are the tools founders would normally need as well as the kind of people they would look for?"
Oh man, so what a question for my team. So building platforms, I think you need to think early on about the architecture and how you're going to build for scalability. That's maybe one of the big differences between a platform that intends to allow people to have the flexibility to create their own experiences versus an app that is highly opinionated in exactly the experience that the end user is going to receive. And so when you're building your team, making sure that you're bringing on people that can think flexibly, can think long-term. When you're architecting your actual platform itself, thinking about every specific feature, how might people want to change this in the end user experience? And it's not easy to do that. Often actually building a showcase, which is a highly opinionated, feature-rich showcase of what your platform can be, is a good move, kind of like what Unreal Tournament did before Unreal became an engine and more of a platform system. Yeah, those are some of the things I would say.
Cool. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, we'll accept some over here. Yes, over there.
Yeah, my name is Ben. I'm a FinTech founder in LA. All of you have really interesting, awesome ideas. My question to each of you is there really a cool or interesting bootstrapping experience that you went through as you're building up your product? I really relate to the sugar experience of going door to door. Like I'm really doing that thing, candy to pocket and on the street. So give me 2 minutes of their time. So I'd love to just hear it in like a cool bootstrapping moment for you.
Just to repeat what you think, so any full or honestly good bootstrapping techniques that our panelists would recommend?
So I have one on the funding side, and then just one for the growth of the business. From a funding perspective, when I initially went out to start fundraising, I pitched close to 100 VCs and didn't get much traction. And so that was when we launched a crowdfunding campaign on republic.co. Really cool. I would look into equity crowdfunding. We talked largely about VC on this panel, but please do not think that VC is the only or the best way to raise money for a business. And so we raised our first 250K on there from 800 different investors all around the country through this funny video that we put together. And that was, that helped with the first prototype. And then from there, we gained enough traction to, raise our $2.5 million round, and then so on from there. So I would say, from a bootstrapping perspective, fundraising. And then, the QR code in the elevator was really important because it's just a matter of how quickly can I get this into the hands of people to get feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. You just want feedback quickly, frequently, and as honestly as possible. For a while, I was just going to people and telling them that there's a new app at my apartment called Sugar that does X, Y, and Z, and you'll get a lot more honest feedback than when you tell people, hey, I'm building this thing, because people will gravitate towards being nice, and you don't want that.
One of the things we did was price our product ridiculously low, like $10, to get users. And we didn't make any, it was not that much money, but it was the best way to get user feedback. So that was a nice way to get paid to do user feedback, or you can even do free. So that's just, that's my hack.
So early on, we were literally glorified travel agents, where myself and Frankie were sitting there day in and day out. We would get hundreds of requests of people who were looking to purchase, flight and hotel, but there was zero automation. So literally, it was us going and looking on Google Flights and Skyscanner and Priceline and all of our competitors at that particular point, and literally sending it in an email through, I forget what the service was, but we sent it through an email in hopes of people clicking into our links and booking a trip. Now, to what the other panelists were saying, we weren't making really any dollars at that particular point, but what it was showing is when we were going out for fundraising, we had demand. We had people who were interested, who wanted to do this type of search based off of budget that wasn't being able to be provided elsewhere. And I think as a founder, going through a lot of those bootstrapping moments, you have to literally eat, sleep, and do your product all day, every day. And we were doing that for months until it got to enough traffic where we were saying, okay, yeah, this makes no sense for us to do this. We need to automate this. We need to scale it.
So, talking about co-founders, one of the best ways to bootstrap your company is to have a good co-founder mix of people that can actually do whatever it is that you need done, because then you don't need to raise capital. So if you're trying to build a tech platform, you need a tech co-founder, right? And if I was building a fitness metaverse in 2014, and my co-founder was in the fitness space, and he taught all of our classes for a year, 6 months to a year, which was crazy. But you need to have the right skills on the team. Otherwise, you need to raise money and pay people to do the things, right? People aren't going to work for free unless they actually are co-founding it. And frankly, if people are working for free with you for a period of time, for 6 months and they're working for free, they are co-founders. That's what it means to found something with people, is to take on that risk to not get paid. And so just stressing the importance of bringing on the right people and developing your own skills. So if you're in college right now and you want to ultimately build software companies, you should probably learn how to build software.
or use
or get really good at safety. Yeah.
This next question comes from online. It says, what advice do you have for international startups looking to break into the LA/SoCal market?
Well, for me, I found a startup in LA, so I didn't come. Well, I think I can give more of an example on how it was for me to come to a market where I didn't know anybody. I guess the number one thing is just, for me, it was just like going places, doing things, meeting people, and just don't be scared of, doing something. So, actually, do you want to answer some of the bootstrap question as well as a combination of both? So I came here originally to do a certificate program at UCLA, just with the plan of staying here, maybe here a couple of years, learn how to speak English because my English was like basically zero when I moved here. And then I found out that LA was super expensive compared to Italy. So I started promoting clubs, which is like was not like my ultimate job. Anyway, like I just wanted to do it to make some money. That's where I met somebody that was looking to rent a house, this villa, and I found out that there was nothing online, and that's how I launched a landing page that was basically using Google AdWords to find clients that were looking for rent villas, and that company $1.2 million in 12 months. After 12 months, my business died, by the way, because that's when I realized that a lot of companies in the US get venture backed and they grow very fast and they can outspend you because they have money to burn, and I had to make money. And then I pivoted that company to a management company. Grew that company to a few $1 million in revenue as well. But I wanted to build a tech company. Actually, that was my ultimate goal. And I'm like, that's not what managing is not technology. And I wanted to automate management as much as possible. So start building automations and start building a team around that and raise money to do the build journey and fully focus on just software development and helping other people fully automate their experience. So, I just tried to make my story short, but it was 13 years already.
Yes.
Hey, so my name's Hunter. I'm a mechanical engineering and software development for Standard Vision down the road. And I know it's pretty apparent that in LA, there's many different types of founders. By the way, this question's for anybody who wants to grab it. There's a wide variety of successful founders with backgrounds and all these different aspects. Are there any traits, maybe one or two traits, that you guys have seen that are common in successful founders?
Okay, just repeating that again. There's lots of kinds of founders out there, lots of kinds of backgrounds, but what are some of those unique traits that you see in the successful founders?
Okay. My opinion is looking for people that are looking for solutions to problems. Every time you see a problem, you want to look for a solution, and I think, this is kind of like my obsession to just like look at things and just want to always improve them. And I think if you have that trait, you're always going to find startups to build. Because at the end of the day, that's what startups do. They look for a problem and they try to fix it and make it better. And then resilience. I think you cannot try to be a founder or an entrepreneur. You kind of have to be. You can build some skills, but in the end of the day, if you're forcing yourself and trying to be an entrepreneur, you may, burn out quickly because you're going to have a lot of lows, like everybody in this panel had, can testify to.
Yeah, I would say having grit is really important. So not getting beat down by anything. It's probably not a coincidence that a lot of us have investment banking backgrounds, and I was joking about, but investment banking was definitely not for me, but it definitely taught me to have grit, and I was forced really to work the late nights. Now, I work really hard, but it's actually not even as hard as I worked then. It also trained me, I think getting trained to be a good communicator, however you do that, in school, by a mentor, it's really, really critical to be a good communicator, especially as a leader, but even just as a member of a high-functioning organization. And then I think, I've approached my life as sort of an RPG, so just gaining as many skill trees as I can. Not being the world's best at any one thing, but being really good at a lot of things. And it takes time, it takes energy, it takes training, and it takes mentorship. It takes risking a lot, failing over and over and over again, and being really bad at things until you get good at them, and then move on to the next thing, and being willing to do that and be the bottom of the totem pole. That'd be my advice.
Yeah. So I think definitely agree with grit and resilience. I was gonna say being relentless. I think it's just incredibly important that you are relentless and you just don't give up. At the end of the day, you're gonna hear no so many times sitting in these seats. Like I mean, we've heard no thousands of times between this collective, and we're gonna hear no later today, and we're gonna hear no tomorrow, and we're gonna hear no like in perpetuity. Because most people are not going to believe that you're going to be able to accomplish your goal. A lot of people won't believe that you're the one to do it. But being relentless is so important. So, for me, when I hear no, I hear not yet, because at the end of the day, when you start to put numbers on the board and you start to show traction, people will come around. There's numerous people on my cap table now who have told me no in the past. And I continue to keep them updated. I think as founders, a lot of times people will hear no and then basically just be like, all right, fuck this person, like I'm never gonna talk to them again. But the reality is that if you don't follow up, you don't keep them updated with your traction, then it's always going to be no. So that's one piece. The other part is passion. I think you have to be overly passionate about what you're building and what you're working on. If you don't feel that way, which is part of the reason why we say no one's gonna steal your idea, if they don't have the passion that you have, right? Like if you care, then you're gonna go through the lows that we all talked about are inevitable, and that's just really, really important. I also think that the passion has to exude through you to the people that you are trying to convince to be on this journey with, both investors as well as teammates. Because at the end of the day, like your first job as a founder is to convince someone else to literally not do something else and then join you on your journey, your mission, your vision. And the only thing that I think is going to convince that person to do that is if you exude and show that passion.
The one thing I think a lot of founders have in common is that we're all unemployable. I mean, why did we create our own jobs, right? Because we just can't work for other people. And I think that's a big part of it is, and it's one of those eccentricities I think all founders have. We're a special breed. Obviously, Kane is like, as investment bankers, you got basically, torn another asshole every other day. You were yelled at and you had to do the FaceTime and it was like the military, it sucked. But it made me a jack of all trades, kind of like master of none, but I knew a little bit about everything. However, it's really important also just to know that it's hard, right? It's a hard thing to do, and grit is really important, and Allison and I would rather die than not see our idea take fruition, and that's how seriously we take it.
So the concept of a good founder, I realize, can be subjective, and so I'll kind of answer this based on founders who go off to either raise money or scale their company. The first thing that comes to mind is that they're really, really good storytellers. And so oftentimes data gets people to believe you, but stories get people to care. And so whether you're pitching to an investor, a potential customer, or a potential employer, the ability to tell the story very well and very quickly, if you're a good storyteller, that'll take you very far. I think, secondly, the ability to, a lot of founders have some chip on their shoulder, right? There's something to prove. There's usually I think you have to be a little off, honestly, to kind of go down this path. And so they're typically very intrinsically motivated and have the ability to delay gratification, right? And so you're not necessarily, if you take things personally, there's just not enough time to take things personally when you're building a company. If other people's success bothers you, it probably won't happen for you. If you need external validation to keep going, that's going to slow you down. You need to be very driven and internally motivated and validated, or learn how to become validated by your own things or behaviors or personal goals. And then, yeah, I mean, the resilience is key. Oftentimes you only fail if you run out of money or if you give up. And so, again, you have to survive long enough to be lucky. And so, how resilient are you? Are you going to stop when the first person tells you no, or are you going to keep going?
So you uncovered why I have the neck tattoos and all of my tattoos. I'm completely unemployable at this point. Going back to investment banking is not part of my life. But no, what I will say is, from a founder's point of view, like, you need to just be ruthlessly doing all the time. And I think a lot of kind of what everybody's mentioning is just executing day in and day out. Like, it's not going to happen the first day. It's not going to happen the first week. Probably not even the first month. And in our particular case, it took over a year for us to actually gain some of that traction. And a lot of people that first week, month, and maybe even year would just completely give up and not continuously do. And so just get out there, and continuously execute.
Yeah, everyone's points have been outstanding. I usually defer to grit and optimism as my first two, but those are really just taken there. Incredibly important to be really gritty, but I would say the ability to sell and understand people is so important in this role. You have to be able to sell investors to invest in your company. You have to sell people to want to join your company and recruit top talent. If you want to build a sole proprietorship, you can do that, but if you take on venture dollars, you have to recruit a lot of talented people. So your ability to sell people on your dream is so important. And then how to understand people. At the end of the day, if you're really trying to be a venture-backed founder, you're going to employ hundreds of people at the time of your career. And how do you motivate and inspire them? And then also, and this is one of the pieces that a lot of people don't talk about, is like move off people. How do you move off people who are toxic to your organization and do it as quickly as possible? And that's the most uncomfortable thing to do, and it's a really difficult skill to master. But I would argue it's one of the most important things as a founder, is to be able to move off people in your organization that are not helping the end goal.
So I think we can take a couple more questions.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey, and I'm a junior studying computer science at UCLA. So I'm currently building a education tech startup, and this question is for everyone. So what advice would you give to start a startup while in school or at an early stage of career?
So Jeffrey's question is, what advice would you give to people who are trying to start a startup while in school in the early stages?
Yeah, absolutely. I was pursuing my MBA when I started my startup, but I was in school at UCLA just like you, so go Bruins, it's awesome. It's a great opportunity because you really can't lose. If your startup fails, you can go re-recruit, you can get a full-time job. I would just look at it as the biggest learning and the most important class you can take is your startup, and pursue it as rigorously as possible. And one of the big things that I did with my previous startup before starting Subject was a lot of these university competitions, which are at least the closest applicable and analogous opportunity to raising from investors. The same type of intensity. It's all non-dilutive capital, which is outstanding, so they're grants. I would really try to explore those, and there's a ton in the UC system, but also throughout the country. So apply to as many competitions as possible, and really view it as a can't-lose opportunity, because you can always re-recruit once you graduate.
Yeah, my advice, start as early as possible. I know for me, I didn't start when we were in college. It was basically right after when I was still working. And now looking back, those like year or two, even I think Travis had mentioned this as well, that it took him 2 years to make that jump. I mean, you're in a prime kind of time, right? It's like you're constantly learning, you're around individuals who are interested in learning, and just like jumping into that as quick as possible, I think is probably your best case. And then never looking back. I think, like, again, like in our particular case, I wish that I jumped probably a year or two earlier, but I can't go back and get that time back. So yeah, the quicker as possible.
So the first version of Sugar, before it kind of pivoted to residential, started out when I was at Stanford. It was called Jetpack. People were delivering things that people needed in less than 15 minutes. So people had backpacks filled with emergency items like tampons, painkillers, condoms, and people would go on the app, ask for a last-minute item, and someone would deliver it. And then if you ask my dad, I was somewhere in California selling toothpaste out of my backpack. And so what I would say is that was a huge opportunity to kind of, build the first version, but The trade-off, I would say, the one to watch out is don't miss out on building some of those relationships with your classmates because you're just too busy working on the company. I would say that I gained a lot, but I definitely didn't have as close-knit of a network once I graduated because I was just so heads down. So just don't miss that opportunity either.
I'll just quickly say, there's hackathons. Go do those. They're fun.
I would tell you that you will never have less to lose than you have right now. When you're young, you have so much energy. You don't have that many responsibilities. As you get older, you get more experience. You also lose that just unlimited sense of energy. You have more connections. There's trade-offs. And I think the kinds of things you shoot for, you're more likely to shoot for the moon when you're young, so try.
Awesome. I think in the interest of time, we'll allow one more question. So, yes.
Hi. First of all, I love LA. I love Los Angeles, but when I was with my company, I found out okay way in Los Angeles, I need like 5 permits and licenses. Meanwhile in Texas, I only need 1. What's your advice with that? What should I do? Okay, from LA or Texas? Thank you.
Okay, I actually have a quick question. So what kind of company were you building, just for reference? Social network. Okay, so to repeat, basically, comparison between the states, when he was trying to build a company here in LA, a lot of permits required, a lot of licenses, versus in Texas, it was a little more minimal. I guess anybody who might have any thoughts on this?
Well, it's not on software, because it actually happened when I had the management company, and LA was the most regulated market for Airbnb, and we launched basically a management Airbnb company. So when we start seeing all this regulation coming, we actually went to Texas, Dallas, and we launched our proof of concept and buildings over there, and then we expanded in LA when we have more resources and ways of kind of like being able to work with this regulation. So I don't know if it applies to you, but that's how we did it.
I would just say really quickly that being in California or New York is like the worst tax environment you can possibly be in. So in the amazing event that you become, you have an exit and you have upside from that, it's gonna kind of not be great to be in one of these states, and yet everybody is here because it's where the funding and where the people are. So if you don't need the funding or the people, or you find some way to do this in not California or New York, you should do that.
Agreed. So a few things to unpack. I think in our particular case, we're in travel and it's very highly regulated when you're talking about like no-fly zones or basically booking tickets in general. And as a founder to founder, I always say like, basically do now and then ask questions later. So like, if it turns out to be 3 or 4, permits that you might need over time, like again, I think just like tactically doing that. But I think in general, like to what almost every other founder is probably mentioning is like there's companies like Anytime, which is like Anytime Mailbox. So you literally create like a pseudo office in Texas for those type of reasons. Like there's ways around kind of getting to different locations and permits, and I know in our particular case, like we've done that as well. And so look at all possibilities. Again, there's not like one size fits all for every industry, but specifically in ours, there's high regulation and a lot of kind of that back and forth permits and things like that.
We have one final question for everybody, and this is to wrap everything up, and it's really about the future of startups in LA. So the question is, where do you see LA's startup ecosystem 5 years from now?
San Francisco. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, they always say, and I used to be a hockey player, so love the saying, Wayne Gretzky, skate where the puck is going, and really be able to anticipate things. And LA is now the 3rd most heavily funded city in the entire U.S. I like to think that in 5 years, very realistically, it could be the 2nd highest, so it'd be great for us. And a lot of talent's coming here from both SF and New York, which are the 2 cities that we trail right now. And great founders like everyone here, employing great people in Los Angeles, and continuing to attract top talent. I think are realistic what would be in the top 2 in the next 5 years.
So I always like to say, coming from New York, when you go out to a bar, right, and you're grabbing some drinks, somebody always says to you, so where do you work, right? That's typically the conversation. Here in LA, it's completely the opposite. People say, what are you working on? And I think that sense of mentality switch is where I'm hopeful for LA. I think it's a great opportunity for people to just start, from basically their idea or a dream and really scale something. So again, I kind of employ other people to try to think differently and have a little bit more of that mindset change.
Completely agree with both of those points. I think LA has the opportunity to really just continue to be the birthplace for a new type of founder as well. A founder that's, burnout is kind of inevitable sometimes, but just a new type of founder that has more work-life balance, happier founders, more connected, more communal, but yeah, echo all the points that have been mentioned so far.
I would just say there's a lot of you guys that are still in college or just going into college, right? So you guys are the future of LA in 5 years. LA Tech Week with the show out is amazing. So I am very, very, very excited to see just a lot of hope and a lot of ideas.
I think in the next 5 years, I agree. I think LA becomes top 2. I believe that because of other great companies that are here, we'll start to see more exits over the next few years, which means that there's more liquidity coming into the market, which means that it actually opens up even more opportunity for young founders to get access to capital, continue to essentially take that liquidity, get more equity, and then continue to keep pull up the gravy train rolling, if you will. So I think that, which is why San Francisco is what it is, right? Like, there's so many companies there, so many exits, and then those people, those early employees, they go and then they found other companies, and then it's just like rinse repeat. I think we'll have an opportunity to start to see that in LA. I remember a couple years ago, Honey had like the $4 billion exit, right? Like, that's a lot of, that first 100 employees at Honey, they did really well, right? And many of them probably went on to go do other things and start making angel investments. So I see that as an opportunity for all of us one day. Hopefully that's the case with us. And hopefully that's the case with everyone who sees that in their own trajectory.
This is going to be a little bit of a different response, but I think that with the emergence of remote and productivity tools that we've seen over the last 5 years, the ability to work remotely and to have remote community was already going to be a thing for the 2020s. Pandemic actually kind of accelerated inorganically this push to remote, but if you have ubiquitous internet, and if you have, hypothetically, a way to meet with people remotely, almost like you're teleporting to them without being in physical proximity, which I think will happen towards the end of the 2020s. If you have those things, then you can choose to live anywhere. And you don't need to live in a place like New York City or San Francisco. Even this access to investors and to people suddenly becomes, you don't need to be in one of those places, and so you can choose to live anywhere in the world. I traveled the world as a digital nomad for many years, and I came to LA specifically because I think it's the best place. And so if you can choose to live anywhere, LA is going to be one of those top places. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if the #1 place for startups actually winds up being somewhere that's not even in the top 5 right now.
I actually agree with you. Yeah, I was about to say something very similar to what you just said. I think it really has changed in the fact that you can really network online. There's a lot of online networking right now. Like, if I had to start a startup 5 years ago, I would have done it in LA. If I had to do it today, I probably wouldn't. For multiple reasons. Also, cost of living. You pay much higher taxes in LA. I don't want to talk bad necessarily about LA, but I think, all I'm saying is there's a lot more opportunities out there. Obviously, if you're in LA, you should take advantage of what LA has to offer, which is a lot. But I think as a future trend, I think it's probably going to change.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you, all. I do want to say a quick note. I want to thank everybody for being here today. And again, I know it was a bit of a drive out. I hope you enjoyed the panel. To everybody joining us online, I hope you did too. I want to invite you all to take a second to network, talk to each other. Please grab a drink. Everybody on the panel, I do want to take a group photo. I think you can. And then If you guys are not already subscribed to Unicorner, you guys have just heard about us for the first time for this event, please check us out. Every Monday morning you'll get a really cool article in your inbox. Thank you all very, very much.